What's up, folks? Nate here at Wheel DynoWorks, and right now we are beginning stage 1 of my 2023 ZX10R build. Stage 1 is effectively going to dive into getting rid of the exhaust, the stock air filter, and the stock velocity stacks. So let's get right to it. We have pulled off the stock muffler, mid-pipe, the X-up servo that was sitting right in there, and the cables. That is all just hanging out down here and on the ground. That is where a lot of you are likely going to stop on your builds, because most folks just stick with the stock headers because there's not a huge performance increase at the top end of the stock headers. But we're going a step further. We'll explain why here as we keep going. Now, again, we're going to the full system, so we've removed the stock titanium headers. This design down here is just a little bit of a restriction through the mid-range, which we'll show you on the dyno graphs. But getting these headers out compared to the rest of the system, which you just pull the muffler and the mid-pipe and the X-up servo, is a mountain of work in comparison. You need to loosen and remove the brackets for the oil cooler, for the radiator. You're pulling off a lot of the upper cowling and the body work just so you can get your hands in there and actually get to the exhaust ports where you can see those gaskets kind of just hanging out up there. And what we've decided to replace it with is the M4 full system. Now, we've sold and tested just about every exhaust system manufacturer there is here at Wheel DynoWorks. We've used on these bikes Graves systems, Akropovich systems, Hindles, Pipeworks, SC Project, Sparks. The M4 system is by far the best bang for your buck made in America. I've used Hindles on the majority of my race bikes in the past because they perform just as well as the Graves or an Akropovich system for a fraction of the cost. But this time around, we wanted to try our very best to go with products made right here in the good old USA, and that's M4 right there in Texas. So thanks to those guys and Kyle especially, they were very easy to work with. Great quality header, easy to assemble, and we're gonna go ahead and get in the bike as soon as we're done draining the oil, just because, well, we did the braking on the dyno, we're gonna get the braking oil out of the bike. So, quick side note, while we're talking about the assembly and build quality here of this M4 header, the stock Kawasaki header was not exactly installed with the same tender love and care that this M4 is going to get. When we were pulling off the stock titanium Cowie headers, the innermost bolts on cylinder 2 and 3, the hardest ones to get to, were actually barely finger tight. I can't even really call them finger tight because we put a socket on them, and just the weight of the wrench was enough to actually start unwinding those bolts. So those almost certainly would have come off had we not caught this, you know, in the first, I think, 40 miles that are on the bike, all time purely on the dyno. And that would have come off on the road on somebody and ended up with a really cool exhaust leak and have them right back at the dealership. Not only did we have header bolt issues on this thing, but the coolant hose up here, if any of you following me on my personal Facebook or Instagram saw, started leaking on my break-in time on the dyno at mile 16. So far for some of the OEM quality here with Team Green, not super thrilled, but I'm glad we're replacing it with high quality stuff from companies like M4. So we have the M4 full system installed. My lovely wife Erin is actually my volunteer or voluntold hand today and is putting the panels back on. I've clearly got the tank off. It is not there, it is sitting on the ground right over there. And we are going to be pulling the airbox lid next so we can go ahead and take a look at some velocity stacks. And then while we are also in there, I'm actually gonna pull the bottom of the lid off as well to get access to the air injection system down there so we can install some block-off plates. Now, as I've shown in previous videos, on top of the valve covers on these bikes and just about every modern inline 4 is this stuff. This is all of the rubber and the sound deadening material that sits on top of your engine and just makes it about impossible to access the block-off plates, to do spark plugs at any point, to do literally anything to the top of these engines. So a lot of retail customers like us to leave them on there because it does dampen a lot of just engine noise, but for any bike that's eventually going to be a race or track day bike, pull that shit off. Literally just yank and cut it out of there. It is only going to get in your way. Just save yourself the headache, remove all of it. Once you're done, you got your block-off plates in place, you'll have something that looks like this. Right there. Perfectly covering both of the ports. Leave the reed valve and the gasket in place. If you don't, you're gonna hate your life and you have to do this twice. Now that that's done, we're getting the airbox back on. We've got some prototype velocity stacks here, so just ignore these. We're actually not gonna talk about these very much. These are old MWR prototype stacks that we're gonna do some testing on. We've done it before, but not quite with this exact setup. So anyway, we'll just ignore the stacks for the moment. Just know that they are 100% not the stock uneven stacks here. They're equal length short stacks. And DNA air filter was replacing the stock air filter. And one more tip while you're doing this, while you have the tank off the bike, go ahead and unplug the O2 sensor. It sits right here, just mounted to the back of the box. So once the box is all back installed, just make sure you unplug this guy and rip it out because it needs to be removed for tuning anyway. Alrighty, so bike back together. Currently flashing at the moment with mapping we've already built for this system and very similar stacks, but not quite the same stacks. And if I walk out here into the shop, you can see the pile of stuff that came off of this thing. And we were actually just weighing it with our scale there. We shaved 26.5 pounds off the bike. We had it back on about 14.3 with the exhaust and all the other stuff in the hangers and all of it. So net loss on the bike, just exhaust, you're about 12.2 pounds, because that also includes the air injection system, the X-up servo, the cables, and just everything that goes along with that, including the O2 sensor. The ECU flash is just about wrapped up with our custom mapping. Let's go ahead and see what she does. Alright, so we are making tonight 198 horsepower and 84 foot-pounds of torque to the tire on pump gas on a bike with now 53 miles on the odometer. Now that is about 2 or 3 horsepower short of where I want to be, but I'm not super shocked that we're just a hair shy of that 200 horsepower number that we're going to get. Again, we're using some old prototype velocity stacks that Nels and I were messing around with 4 years ago for these things, 3 years ago, something like that. And the actual modern, up-to-date MWR stacks I'm using this bike are currently still on order and sitting in customs somewhere. So once we do get them in, we'll obviously go ahead and do, I'll call it a stage 1.5 for you folks out there. With the actual stacks we'll be running in this bike, we'll get that nice crispy 200 horsepower number for everybody. And then we will move on to phase 2, which is going to be ergonomics and shaving a whole bunch of weight off of this bike. Way more than we just did actually, even with the full exhaust system, even with all the emission systems. And again, that is 200 horsepower to the tire with nothing more than the M4 full system, some velocity stacks, and our custom mapping here at Wheel DynoWorks. Now, I mentioned earlier that I'd show you why we actually decided to go with the full system on these bikes, and it is 100% to do with the power losses in the mid-range from the 6th generation ZX10 headers. The 5th gen, both the first half and second half, so before and after 2019 essentially, the stock headers were amazing. They weren't honestly even worth replacing. But on the 6th gens, with the header change to meet Euro 5 compliance, there's now pretty big dips in the power curve, kind of in the bottom quarter to half of the RPM range. And I'll show you a graph here so you can kind of visualize what I'm talking about. So what I've overlaid here for you is actually the bike that we just did maybe a month or so ago that we posted the video of as well, the one with the cool BST wheels and the SC Project 3/4 system. And you can see the red line there, the SC Project, you know, we're making essentially the same peak number, you know, 198 versus 199. But there, between 7,000 and 8,000 RPMs, and right around 9,000 RPMs, you can see there's pretty big losses on that red line there, which is, again, that 3/4 exhaust system. That is not specific to the SC Project system. That is purely from the Gen 6 stock headers just not being as good as the Gen 5s were. That's about 8 horsepower at 7,500 RPMs and about 6 horsepower at 9,000 RPMs. So it's certainly not negligible performance differences. Now, is that 6 to 8 horsepower down low there, sort of in the mid-range, right when you're coming on the throttle, worth it for the additional headache? Because there's a lot more headache to do the headers on these bikes than it is just do the slip-on and the cat delete. And is it worth the extra money? That's kind of up to you. Again, your peak number is going to be the same. With a good set of stacks, our custom mapping, and a good pipe, you're going to be damn near or right at 200 horsepower to the tire on pump gas. But if you want that extra power off the bottom and through the middle of the RPM range, then yeah, I'd go with the full system. And again, I am 100% backing these guys over here at M4. Like I said, on my previous bikes, I've ran everything from Akrapovic systems to tons and tons of Hindles. And the only reason I ever ran the Hindles was because I could never bring myself personally, as a guy that's all about best bang for your buck, to spend money on something like a full Graves, which is nearly $3,000 after taxes. So the same performance from a pipe that cost, you know, a little over $1,000 for a full system versus $2,800 or whatever they are, the titanium's like a 2-pound difference, guys. 2 pounds is nothing. I mean, take a shit before you go ride and you'll lose more than that. And here at Wheel DynoWorks this season, we really are trying to do 100% American-made products wherever possible. Now, yes, I'm well aware that everybody's getting their materials from overseas. It's inevitable. Nobody's making carbon fiber here in the US, at least not that I'm aware of, on an exhaust system. Somebody please in the comments correct me if I'm wrong, because I hope I am, but I'm pretty sure I'm not. So yes, all these materials are brought in from overseas, probably out of China, but M4 is all handmade and assembled here in the US, right in Texas, and we think that is fucking awesome. That is it for stage 1 on the ZX10 200 horsepower build. Again, I know we're 2 horsepower shy of 200 horsepower. We'll get there when the stacks that we will actually be using on the bike this season show up, and I'll go ahead and do another video for you to show that as well. In the meantime, if you guys have any questions about uncorking your ZX10 properly, give us a call, shoot us an email, support@wheeldynoworks.com. Again, anybody can put stacks and a pipe on these bikes, but the real secret sauce is 100% our custom mapping that we build here in-house at Wheel DynoWorks on our dyno every single day. A great example of that difference is the quick shifter and auto blippers on these Gen 6s after we've flashed them with our most up-to-date mapping. Everybody else that's had their bikes tuned by every other tuner, I won't start naming names because it doesn't matter, complains that the quick shifter isn't that great and the auto blipper really sucks. Well, give ours a shot, because it absolutely doesn't, and I'm absolutely not going to tell you how I managed to resolve that issue, because it took me quite a long time on the dyno to figure out what was going on that was causing these things to jerk so frickin' much when you're working the blipper. As always, if you have any questions, give us a call, shoot us an email, support@wheeldynoworks.com. We are always happy to help.